Liam had always dreamed of visiting famous landmarks around the world. When he finally arrived in a country he had always wanted to explore, he couldn't hide his excitement. He had read about the grand palaces, the historic monuments, and of course, the famous royal guards stationed outside. Today, he would get to see them in person. He stood in front of the beautiful palace gates, the sun shining brightly above him, casting shadows on the ancient stone walls. The palace looked like something straight out of a history book, with tall towers and intricate designs. Liam couldn't wait to take pictures and send them to his friends back home. As Liam and his friends made their way to the entrance, they passed by a group of tourists standing quietly, staring at the two towering royal guards who were positioned at the gates. These guards were famous for their unwavering discipline. Dressed in traditional uniforms and holding long ceremonial weapons, they stood still, almost like statues. Liam couldn't help but laugh to himself. He had heard rumors that these guards never moved and were completely serious about their duties. To him, they looked almost comical, standing so still, not even blinking. It seemed like they were robots or statues placed there for decoration. He nudged his friends and said, "Look at them. They're like real-life statues. I bet they don't even blink." His friends chuckled. The atmosphere was lighthearted, and everyone was in a festive mood, taking pictures and enjoying the historic scenery. But for Liam, something about these guards seemed odd. Why were they so serious all the time? Why couldn't they smile or show any signs of life? He began to feel a mix of curiosity and amusement. As they walked closer, Liam noticed how disciplined the guards were. One was tall, with strong, confident posture, and his dark skin stood out in his sharp uniform. His name, as Liam later learned, was Darius. He stood tall and unyielding, holding his ceremonial weapon with a firm grip, as though it were an extension of his very being. His presence alone commanded respect. Liam's curiosity only grew. He wanted to know if these guards were really as unmoving as people said. Were they truly statues? Or could they somehow react if someone approached them? The thought of testing the guards' patience made him grin. He had always been one to push boundaries and see what would happen. "Hey, let's see what happens if I try something," Liam whispered to his friends. His tone was light, joking. He wasn't intending to cause any trouble. He just thought it would be funny to see if the guard would react. His friends hesitated. "Liam, don't," one of them said. "I've heard these guys are serious. They won't appreciate it." But Liam shrugged it off. "It's just a joke. I'm not going to do anything bad. I just want to see if they'll even blink." His friends reluctantly agreed to watch, even though they weren't entirely sure it was a good idea. Liam, with a mischievous grin on his face, slowly approached the guard. He was just a few steps away now, and the moment felt both exciting and risky. The other tourists around them were oblivious to what was about to happen. Liam could see Darius standing as still as ever, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Without thinking twice, Liam reached out his hand and grabbed the guard's ceremonial weapon. It was heavy in his hand, and the guard still didn't move. At first, it felt like a harmless prank, but then something changed. The air around them grew tense. Liam's heart started to race. Was this a mistake? Was the guard going to stop him? He didn't know, but he was about to find out. As soon as Liam touched the ceremonial weapon, a sense of unease began to creep up his spine. At first, nothing happened. The guard, Darius, stood motionless, like a statue. Liam laughed quietly, thinking that his little joke had worked. After all, the guard didn't seem to care. His friends chuckled in the background, clearly amused by Liam's bold move. But then, in an instant, everything changed. Without warning, Darius's eyes shifted sharply. His head turned slightly towards Liam, and in that brief moment, the entire atmosphere seemed to shift. The calm, serene air was replaced with tension. Liam's heart skipped a beat. The guard's face remained as expressionless as ever, but there was an intensity in his gaze that Liam hadn't expected. For a second, Liam thought he might have pushed it too far. The weapon, which had seemed like an amusing prop only moments ago, suddenly felt heavy in his hand. It wasn't a toy. It was a symbol of authority, discipline, and respect. Liam froze for a brief moment, unsure of what to do next. Then, Darius spoke. His voice was deep and commanding, yet controlled. "Let go of my weapon," Darius said, his words sharp and clear. Liam was taken aback. His hand trembled slightly as he quickly released the weapon, setting it back in its place with an audible clink. He hadn't expected the guard to speak so firmly. The group of tourists around them had stopped talking, and a few people turned to watch, sensing the sudden change in the mood. Liam's friends fell silent, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. The royal guard did not move an inch. Darius stood tall and unyielding, his gaze still locked onto Liam, but now with a quiet intensity. There was no hint of anger in his expression, but there was something unmistakably stern in his presence. Liam tried to shrug off the awkwardness. "Hey, no harm done, right?" he said, hoping to make light of the situation. But Darius didn't smile. The stoic guard remained focused, his posture as perfect as ever. Liam quickly backed away, feeling the weight of the situation. "I didn't mean anything by it," he muttered, turning to his friends. They looked equally uncomfortable, exchanging glances but saying nothing. The laughter that had filled the air moments ago was now gone, replaced by the awkward silence of a tense moment. Darius didn't speak another word. His job was not to engage in unnecessary conversation, and his calm professionalism reminded everyone around him of the importance of his duty. He didn't need to justify his response. His actions spoke louder than any words could. As Liam and his friends moved away from the guards, they realized that their lightheartedness had been misplaced. What seemed like a harmless joke to them had been disrespectful to the guard's position and to the history he represented. Liam's thoughts were swirling now. He hadn't expected things to escalate the way they had, but the seriousness in the guard's reaction made him reconsider his actions. He could still feel the tension in the air, as though everyone around him had been waiting for a spark that would light up the situation. It wasn't just about taking the weapon. It was about understanding the respect that came with it. To many, the royal guards were a symbol of the country's heritage and pride. They weren't there to be mocked or made the subject of a joke. As they continued walking away, Liam glanced back one last time. Darius was still standing where he had been, his eyes fixed ahead, completely composed. It was clear that the royal guard had not been moved by the prank. He had remained professional throughout, but his response had been a reminder of the seriousness of his role. Liam felt a pang of regret, realizing that what he had thought was harmless had been far from it. The guard's response had been harsh in the sense that it had shattered the illusion that these guards were merely statues. In fact, they were people with a deep sense of duty, and Liam had learned that their composure wasn't something to be taken lightly. As they left the palace, Liam couldn't help but reflect on the moment. It was a reminder that some things, even in their quiet stillness, demanded respect. As Liam and his friends made their way down the palace path, a sense of discomfort lingered in the air. The encounter with the royal guard had left Liam feeling unsettled. He had always prided himself on being carefree, the type of person who could laugh at almost anything. But now, that joke he thought would be harmless was starting to feel like a mistake. He couldn't shake the image of Darius's sharp, unwavering gaze. Liam tried to shake it off, telling himself he hadn't meant any harm. It was just a quick joke, right? But as they walked further away from the guard, he couldn't help but feel a strange tension in the air. His friends, who had been laughing along with him earlier, now seemed quieter. It wasn't just the guard's reaction that had changed everything. It was the sudden awareness of the respect that had been missing from his actions. The group continued to wander through the palace grounds, but Liam's mind kept returning to Darius. He hadn't expected the guard to be so quick to react, nor so composed in his response. It had happened in the blink of an eye. One moment, Liam was laughing, and the next, he was facing the consequences of his thoughtless behavior. Behind them, The other tourists seemed to be whispering about what had just happened. Liam didn't know what they were saying, but the sharp glances from a few of them told him that they had seen the seriousness in the royal guard's response. He tried to push it out of his mind and enjoy the rest of the visit, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. A few minutes later, as they moved toward the next part of the palace, Liam's phone buzzed. He took it out, hoping for a distraction. It was a message from a friend back home, asking if he was having fun. He quickly typed a reply, but before he hit send, a new notification popped up, a video that someone had posted of the moment with the guard. Liam's heart sank as he clicked on the video. It was a short clip, showing him reaching for the guard's weapon. He could hear the laughter from his friends in the background, but it was followed by Darius's clear voice, demanding Liam to let go of the weapon. The video ended with Liam quickly stepping back, his face turning red with embarrassment. It was then that Liam realized how wrong he had been. What had seemed like a harmless joke to him now looked completely different in the video. The guard had been completely in control, and his voice was firm, but not angry. It was as if he was sending a clear message. This wasn't something to be taken lightly. The realization hit Liam harder than he expected. He had disrespected something much bigger than just the guard himself. The royal guard wasn't just standing there for decoration. They represented centuries of history and tradition. And to Darius, this wasn't just about a joke. It was about maintaining the integrity of his duty. It was about the pride of his heritage and the respect he owed to his position. As they continued walking, Liam's mind kept racing. He had assumed that the guards were there to be laughed at, to be a part of the tourist experience. But Darius's response had shown him otherwise. The guard wasn't a statue. He was a person with a responsibility, and Liam had learned the hard way that some things were not to be touched, not to be joked about. The rest of the tour passed in a blur. Liam tried to focus on the beauty of the palace and the amazing history surrounding him. But his thoughts kept returning to that moment. How had he not understood the seriousness of the situation sooner? Why hadn't he thought about the guard's role, the meaning behind his presence? By the time Liam and his friends left the palace, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. They had all learned something that day. While it wasn't a lesson they had expected to learn, it was one they would never forget. Liam realized that respect didn't always come easily, especially when dealing with something or someone you didn't fully understand. The Royal Guard wasn't just part of a performance for tourists. They were an important part of a long and proud tradition. And in that moment, Liam had learned the importance of understanding and respecting the people who carried that tradition forward. The days following the incident with the Royal Guard felt long and uncomfortable for Liam. What had started as a simple joke now seemed much more serious. The video of him touching the guard's weapon had spread across social media, and soon, people were talking about it everywhere. Some of his friends sent him messages asking if he was okay, but none of them seemed to understand the gravity of what had happened. They were still laughing about it, thinking it was just an awkward situation that would eventually blow over. But to Liam, it didn't feel like something that would just go away. The video had a life of its own now. Every time he checked his phone, more comments and shares popped up, many of them criticizing his actions. It didn't take long for the story to spread beyond his social circle. News outlets picked up the story, turning it into a larger conversation. The incident with the Royal Guard became the talk of the town, and it didn't feel good. The reaction was strong. Some people found Liam's actions funny, believing it was all in good fun. They thought it was just an innocent joke and that the guard should have taken it lightly. But many others disagreed. They saw it as a blatant disrespect to the guard, to the traditions he represented, and to the country's culture. What seemed harmless to Liam had been offensive to others, and that was a hard pill for him to swallow. It didn't take long before the conversation shifted from just Liam and the guard to a larger discussion about cultural respect. People began to talk about the role of the Royal Guard in their society and why their duty was so important. Darius the guard had always been more than just a person standing at the palace gates. He and others like him carried the weight of history on their shoulders, representing the strength and heritage of a proud nation. Some of the comments online began to focus on Darius's race, adding a layer of complexity to the situation. Many people, especially those from the Black Lives Matter movement, felt that the incident highlighted how black individuals in positions of authority were often treated with less respect than their white counterparts. They argued that Liam's actions, while seemingly harmless, were rooted in a lack of understanding about how such behaviors could affect someone of Darius's background. The discussion quickly became more than just a simple prank gone wrong. It became a conversation about race, authority, and respect. While some people defended Liam, insisting that it was just a misunderstanding, others believed that the guard's firm response was completely justified. They argued that no one, no matter their position or race, should be disrespected in such a way. Darius had a right to stand his ground, and his quick response showed that he wouldn't tolerate being mocked. Liam, meanwhile, was left to reflect on his actions. He never imagined that such a small, thoughtless decision would turn into something so big. He began to read the comments and articles, trying to understand the broader implications of what he had done. He realized that he had taken something precious and important, Darius's duty, and turned it into a joke without even thinking about the consequences. As the conversation continued to grow, Liam's friends began to treat the situation more seriously. They apologized to him for not stopping him sooner, but they also urged him to learn from it. The lighthearted attitude they had all shared at the beginning of the trip was now gone. The seriousness of the matter had overshadowed their vacation. Liam couldn't help but feel guilty, but he knew he had to take responsibility for his actions. Liam eventually posted an apology online, acknowledging that he had disrespected not only Darius, but also the tradition and the culture that the guard represented. It wasn't easy to admit that he had been wrong, but he knew it was the right thing to do. The apology wasn't just for Darius, it was for everyone who had felt disrespected by his actions. Though the situation had been difficult, it had opened Liam's eyes to the importance of understanding different cultures and the traditions they held dear. He realized that respect was not something that could be taken lightly, and it wasn't always easy to recognize when you were crossing a line. But the experience had taught him that sometimes, even small actions could have big consequences. After the incident with the Royal Guard, the world seemed to be watching. Liam's actions had sparked a much larger conversation about respect, authority, and cultural traditions. The story had gone viral, and many people had shared their opinions online. Some criticized Liam for his thoughtlessness, while others defended him, claiming it was just a joke that had gone wrong. However, in the midst of all the noise, the one voice that stood out the most was that of Darius, the Royal Guard. A few days after the incident, Darius appeared in a short public statement. It wasn't a long speech, but the words he shared had a lasting impact on everyone who heard them. He spoke with calm authority, addressing the situation without anger or bitterness. "I want to explain something important," Darius began. His voice was clear and steady, without the sharpness that some might have expected. "The weapon I carry, the uniform I wear, and the position I hold, they all represent something much larger than myself. I am not just standing there as a statue. I am there to honor my country's traditions and to uphold its history." Liam, who had been following the news closely, watched the interview with a mix of guilt and respect. He hadn't fully understood the significance of the Royal Guard's role before, but hearing Darius speak opened his eyes. Darius wasn't just a person in a uniform. He was a part of something ancient and sacred, and his role had deep meaning. "The weapon I hold," Darius continued, "is not a prop or something to be treated lightly. It is a symbol of the responsibility I carry. The Guard's role has been passed down for generations, and it is a position that requires discipline, focus, and respect. We stand in these positions not just for tradition, but for the honor of our ancestors." As Darius spoke, Liam felt a wave of realization wash over him. The prank he had pulled wasn't just disrespectful to the Guard, it was disrespectful to the history and culture Darius represented. It wasn't about the weapon. It was about the respect that was owed to the traditions behind it. Darius didn't stop there. He went on to explain how his role as a royal guard was not only about physical strength or precision, it was about composure and poise under pressure. As a guard, Darius was trained to withstand distractions, to remain focused even when people joked, took pictures, or tried to provoke him. His job was to remain still, to not engage with those around him, no matter what happened. "I have been in this position for many years," Darius said, "and I have faced countless distractions. I have seen tourists try to take my weapon, make fun of my stillness, and laugh at my discipline. But my job is not to react. My job is to remain in control, to represent my country with honor." The more Liam listened, the more he understood. What he had thought was just a harmless prank was, in fact, a deep violation of something far greater than he had imagined. He had crossed a line, not just with the guard, but with the entire tradition that Darius represented. His laughter had been misplaced, his actions thoughtless. In his statement, Darius also addressed the racial aspect that had been brought up in the media. Many people had pointed out that, because of Darius's race, his authority and actions were often questioned in ways that others wouldn't be. But Darius didn't dwell on that. Instead, he spoke about his pride in his role and the importance of respect for all individuals, regardless of background or appearance. "I am proud of who I am," Darius said, his voice firm but not angry. "And I am proud of the work I do. I do not expect people to understand my role fully, but I do expect them to respect it. I do not ask for special treatment, but I do ask for respect, for my duty, and for the position I hold." Liam couldn't help but feel a deep sense of admiration for Darius. The guard's composure, his unwavering sense of responsibility, and his ability to speak with such dignity in the face of disrespect made Liam realize how wrong he had been. The video of Darius's statement went viral just as quickly as the original footage of the incident. People from all over the world applauded Darius for his calm and professional response. Some expressed regret for their earlier judgments, while others praised him for teaching a valuable lesson in respect and understanding. For Liam, it was a turning point. He had learned a hard lesson, but it was one he would carry with him forever. He understood now that every action, no matter how small, carried consequences. What seemed like a harmless joke could, in fact, harm someone's dignity and cultural identity. Darius's words had made a lasting impression on Liam, and he vowed to be more mindful of the way he interacted with people and cultures moving forward. The days after Darius's statement were filled with even more conversations, both online and in the real world. The incident with Liam and the Royal Guard had sparked a debate that extended far beyond the two of them. People from all walks of life started to discuss the deeper issues that had been raised by the incident: respect for authority, cultural understanding, and the role of race in how people are treated. Liam, who had originally thought of the moment as a lighthearted prank, now found himself at the center of a much bigger conversation. His actions had unintentionally shined a light on the ways in which we, as a society, often overlook cultural differences and treat people based on stereotypes or misunderstandings. Liam's joke had been seen by some as an innocent mistake, but by others, it was a reflection of a deeper problem, one that stemmed from a lack of respect for traditions and the authority of individuals in positions like Darius. He began to read articles from writers who focused on social justice and race, many of whom used the incident as a case study. They talked about how people of color, especially those in uniform, often had to endure disrespect from the public. They noted that people might not always take them seriously, and they might be treated as objects for amusement rather than individuals with dignity and authority. This was a perspective Liam had never fully considered before. It wasn't just about the incident with the guard. The broader issue was about how people from marginalized communities, like Darius, were often treated unfairly or viewed through a lens of bias. This included not just public figures like Darius, but everyday people too, who might face similar judgment or discrimination because of their race. As these conversations unfolded, The Black Lives Matter movement took notice of the story. They shared their thoughts on social media, drawing attention to the way the public reacted to Darius's firm response. They noted that it wasn't just about the prank Liam had pulled, but about how society often treats black people in positions of authority. The movement reminded everyone that the respect shown to someone shouldn't depend on their appearance or their role. It should be about recognizing their humanity and the value of their contributions. Liam couldn't ignore the weight of these discussions. As the days went on, he found himself reflecting more deeply on his own role in these conversations. He had been a part of the problem, even if unintentionally. His joke had minimized the importance of what Darius represented, and it had ignored the fact that people in positions like his deserved respect, regardless of their background. Through these discussions, Liam learned a valuable lesson about cultural awareness. He understood that respect for others, especially those who serve in positions of authority, should never be taken for granted. He also realized that cultural traditions, no matter how foreign they might seem, held deep meaning for those who practiced them, and it was essential to understand that before making judgments. While Liam was grappling with the fallout of the incident, Darius continued to hold his ground. He didn't engage much in the media frenzy that followed his public statement. Instead, he focused on what was most important: his job and his role in preserving the traditions he had sworn to protect. For Darius, the attention wasn't about him. It was about educating the public and helping them understand the value of respect and the importance of recognizing the humanity in everyone. Liam, for his part, decided to use his own platform to share his experience. He posted an apology on social media, acknowledging his mistake and the lessons he had learned. He spoke about the importance of respecting other cultures and recognizing the authority of those in positions like Darius. He hoped his story would encourage others to think twice before making assumptions or jokes that might inadvertently cause harm. As the weeks passed, the conversation about respect and cultural understanding continued to grow. It wasn't just about the incident at the palace anymore. It was about a shift in how society viewed authority, race, and respect for tradition. Liam, once just a tourist who had made a careless mistake, had now become part of a broader movement toward understanding and awareness. And while the incident had been a painful experience for him, it had ultimately taught him something invaluable: the importance of thinking before acting, especially when it came to respecting other cultures and the people who represent them. The days after the incident had been filled with a mix of reflection, learning, and growth for Liam. The weight of his actions had hit him hard, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed an important opportunity to understand and respect the culture he was visiting. But now, with the events behind him, he was beginning to see things more clearly. Liam had spent a lot of time thinking about what happened, especially after reading the messages, articles, and comments that had flooded his social media accounts. He had heard the opinions of people who defended him, saying it was just a joke, as well as those who criticized him for disrespecting a sacred tradition. But the most important takeaway for Liam wasn't the public debate. It was the lesson he had learned about respect. He began to understand that his behavior had not just been thoughtless. It had been dismissive of something much bigger than himself. Darius, the royal guard, had stood in that position for years, honoring a tradition that had been passed down for generations. To Liam, Darius had just seemed like a stoic figure in a uniform, someone there to complete a task. But now, Liam realized that Darius was part of something far more meaningful, a living, breathing symbol of his country's history and values. What struck Liam most was how little he had considered the importance of tradition and the responsibilities people had to uphold it. He had been caught up in his own amusement, thinking that he could make a joke at the expense of someone else's dignity. But through reading and hearing about the experiences of others, he understood that everyone deserved respect, no matter their role or background. Darius wasn't just a guard. He was a person who took pride in his job and in his heritage. He had earned the right to stand in that position, and Liam had violated that trust with a thoughtless act. The impact of the incident wasn't just personal for Liam. It had also sparked a larger conversation about race, respect, and cultural sensitivity. People from all walks of life had shared their thoughts on how Black individuals, especially those in positions of authority, were often treated unfairly. The Black Lives Matter movement had used the story to highlight how people of color were sometimes viewed as less worthy of respect, even when they held important roles. For Liam, this was an eye-opening realization. He had never thought about how his actions might reflect broader societal issues, but now he understood how even small acts of disrespect could contribute to larger patterns of bias. In the weeks that followed, Liam took it upon himself to learn more about the culture he had been visiting and the history behind the Royal Guard. He spent time reading about the country's traditions, its values, and the significance of the Guard's role. He even spoke with people who worked at the palace, asking them about their experiences and what the Royal Guard meant to them. Each conversation helped him grow, opening his eyes to the complexities of a culture that, at first, had seemed so distant and unfamiliar. Liam also became more aware of his own privileges. As a tourist, he had felt entitled to joke around, to test boundaries, and to take part in a spectacle without thinking about the consequences. But he soon realized that his privileges didn't give him the right to ignore the dignity and responsibility of others. He could have learned the same lesson without making a mistake, but sometimes it took a wake-up call to fully grasp the importance of respect. As time went on, Liam found ways to share what he had learned. He wrote about his experience, reflecting on the lessons he had gained and the mistakes he had made. He shared his story with others, hoping that his mistake could become an opportunity for others to learn. He spoke about how important it was to approach different cultures with an open mind and heart, and how essential it was to think before making judgments or jokes. But perhaps the most meaningful way Liam learned from the experience was through his actions. He made a commitment to always approach other cultures with the respect they deserved, to never take someone's position or role for granted, and to think about the broader impact of his words and actions. He realized that respect wasn't just about following the rules. It was about understanding and valuing the people around you for who they truly were. The lessons Liam had learned were hard, but they were also invaluable. The incident with the Royal Guard had shaken him, but it had also helped him grow. As he moved forward, Liam knew he would carry these lessons with him. He hoped that his experience would serve as a reminder to others of the importance of respect, understanding, and the willingness to learn from our mistakes. The incident with the Royal Guard had changed Liam's perspective on many things. What had started as a simple vacation had turned into an unforgettable lesson in respect, culture, and understanding. He had never imagined that a lighthearted joke could lead to such a big lesson, but in hindsight, he realized that the consequences of his actions had been necessary for his personal growth. In the weeks that followed, Liam began to make a conscious effort to educate himself about other cultures and traditions. He had spent so much time focusing on the excitement of being a tourist that he had never truly taken the time to understand the deeper meanings behind the places he visited. But now he saw the value in learning about the history and customs of the countries he explored, so he could show genuine respect for the people and traditions he encountered. Liam started to connect with others who had similar experiences. He joined online communities and forums where people shared their stories about cultural misunderstandings and how they had learned to respect the places they visited. Through these discussions, Liam found a sense of comfort in knowing that he wasn't alone. Many people, just like him, had once made mistakes in how they interacted with other cultures, but they had taken the time to learn from those mistakes and grow. One of the first things Liam did was reach out to Darius, the Royal Guard, to apologize personally for his actions. While Liam had already posted an apology online, he felt it was important to connect with Darius directly, even though he didn't expect anything in return. He simply wanted to express his regret for what had happened and to thank Darius for showing him the importance of cultural respect. Darius's response was kind and thoughtful. He acknowledged that, while the incident had caught him off guard, he understood that people sometimes acted out of ignorance rather than malice. He appreciated Liam's sincere apology and encouraged him to continue learning and growing. Darius also shared his own experiences as a royal guard, talking about the pride he felt in his role and the responsibility he carried. It was a humbling conversation for Liam, who now saw Darius as more than just a guard in a uniform. He was a man with a deep sense of pride in his work and culture. Liam's journey of self-discovery didn't stop there. He began to look at the world around him through a different lens. He realized that it wasn't enough to just apologize for a mistake and move on. He needed to actively seek out opportunities to show respect for others and learn about the traditions that made each culture unique. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about making the effort to understand and value the people you encountered along the way. As Liam traveled more, he became more mindful of the way he interacted with the world. He made sure to research the customs and traditions of the places he visited, and when he met someone from a different background, he took the time to listen to their stories and learn from their experiences. He also started to speak out when he saw others acting disrespectfully or making jokes at the expense of someone else's culture. He knew that it was important to be an ally, not just for his own growth, but to help foster a more respectful and understanding world. His story, though a personal one, became a larger conversation. People who had followed the incident online reached out to him, thanking him for sharing his experience. Some admitted that they had made similar mistakes and that Liam's journey had inspired them to reflect on their own actions. It was a powerful reminder that learning from our mistakes was not only a personal endeavor, it was something that could help others as well. As for Darius, he continued to serve as a royal guard, standing tall at his post with pride and dedication. He became somewhat of a symbol of discipline and respect, not just in his country, but around the world. People respected him not just for his duty, but for the way he handled the situation with grace and professionalism. He had shown that even in the face of disrespect, one could maintain their dignity and use the experience as an opportunity to educate others. For Liam, the journey wasn't just about learning to respect others. It was about understanding himself and the way he interacted with the world. He had learned that small actions, like a joke or a comment, could have a lasting impact. But he had also learned that growth came from being open to change, from listening, and from taking responsibility for one's actions. And as he moved forward, Liam promised himself that he would continue to learn, to grow, and to respect the cultures and people he encountered. It was a lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his life.